Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for joining us, and we hope you have a great new year. Well, they're after your money. It's scam alert time. Scams we will see in the new year, but first, two leading journalists take on some big topics. We'll get to all of that after these words.
Welcome to the fast-paced and unrehearsed weekly discussion featuring the leaders who help shape your world. Join us as we address the issues that impact you each and every day. This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, we have some big subjects we want to take on, and joining me to do that is Tom Lehman. He's the Capitol reporter with WGAL News 8, and Marc Levy. He's with the Associated Press. All right, I guess we have to start, Marc Levy, and I'll begin with you. With the 14th Amendment, keeping candidates off the ballot. We all have been following that with Donald J. Trump, and we know, of course, what's happened there involves Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. But it's not just happening elsewhere, it's also happening in the state of Pennsylvania. Explain that.
So there's a liberal activist named Gene Stilp who has sued in a state court to keep Congressman Scott Perry off the ballot under the 14th Amendment, which is sort of referred to as the insurrection clause. It's a Civil War era thing designed to keep insurrectionists from holding public office. And this same person, Gene Stilp, says that he will file in state court to try to prevent Donald Trump from being on the ballot in Pennsylvania. Gene had a case in federal court. He withdrew it because he thinks he'll have a better chance of success in state court in getting a favorable ruling. Now, the context here is that there are cases from Maine and Colorado that Donald Trump has appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, and the U.S. Supreme Court could dispense with all of this before we get a ruling in state court on any of this.
Yeah, and the situation in Pennsylvania also involves a representative, federal representative from the 10th Congressional District, Scott Perry.
Yeah, so Scott Perry facing similar legal action as we've seen the former president face. Perry running for re-election and you know, he's going to be facing a whole bevy of potential Democratic challengers, whichever one makes it out of the primary. But they've made this issue and his actions, you know, prior to the January 6th riot after the 2020 elections, they've made that out to be a big issue. So obviously he's kind of got to contend with the political side of this, but also the legal side. And again, on the legal side, with this lawsuit being filed earlier this week, now he's going to have to potentially defend himself in Pennsylvania courts, depending on what they end up doing. Right.
Just to confirm what you said before, but the U.S. Supreme Court could resolve this whole issue, correct?
They could, yeah, and that is the expectation. For instance, Scott Perry's lawyer said as much to me that he expects that the U.S. Supreme Court will dispense with this and make it clear that the insurrection clause is not going to apply to Scott Perry or Donald Trump, for that matter, for their actions leading up to the attack on the Capitol on January 6, 2021.
All right, so this is a wait and see, basically, where it stands.
I think it's certainly a wait and see. I think the federal courts are probably going to be the final decider on this anyway.
Yeah, not state courts.
Yeah, and I think for Perry and Trump, this is going to be, you know, once they have that clarity from the U.S. Supreme Court, they will know, okay, I don't have to worry about this anymore.
But it's an issue that's until we get some conclusion in the courts, it's not going away, correct?
People are going to keep talking about it. I mean, certainly after the Colorado ruling and then the ruling from Maine Secretary of State about the former president, there's definitely a lot of people talking about this, but it may just end up being noise if these candidates are allowed to stay on the ballot.
Yeah, some people think that it should be up to the voters to decide this kind of issue.
And we've seen that this case has played out, this type of a case has played out in other states. So we've seen state court rulings in Michigan, Minnesota, New Hampshire, where state courts basically refuse to get involved and say, you know, in some cases, a political party can put whoever they want to put on the ballot, or the New Hampshire court saying, you know, this is not a matter for the courts to decide. So without a doubt, courts have tread very lightly on this.
All right, education typically is a big issue in the state of Pennsylvania. We're going to talk about funding after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
All right, it's time on Pennsylvania Newsmakers to talk about education, and I've referred to this subject as the funding fix. Does that make sense at all?
That's the big question. We all know that a Pennsylvania court ruled that the way Pennsylvania funds public education was unconstitutional. A lot of disparities between different districts has to do with property taxes, but the bottom line is
the poor and the minorities aren't funded adequately according to the decision. Go ahead.
Essentially, and that big question, how do you resolve this, is going to be a dominating one in 2024 for Governor Shapiro, for the legislature. A lot of advocates, particularly the people who filed the lawsuit that got this all started, have said the fix in many ways is going to require billions, not millions of dollars to fix. But actually making that happen, that's going to be a tough thing, especially after we saw a lot of conflict last year over this. And not only that, but you know, passing anything in the legislature is often a tough task.
Yeah, Mark, raising money, not easy, right?
Right. Well, look, the state is awash in billions of dollars in surplus money, and there's reasons for that. So the money, in theory, is there, but you know, the Senate is controlled by Republicans who are wary about raising that kind or spending that sort of money. And the governor, too, has said that he understands the need for equity in schools to make sure that the poorest schools are funded equitably. But he also says that someone's got to pay for that. And so there could be some sort of political deal between the Democratic House and Republican Senate that may involve.
That is, if the House ever gets in session, correct?
If the House ever comes back to session.
Explain that to other folks. They may not be aware of that.
The House has talked about the need to replace a leaky pipe, but the subtext here is that the House is really at a 101-101 tie with one vacant seat held by a Democrat. And although one Republican is serving overseas with the military, it may be 101-100, but this has been an ongoing issue with the House so closely divided that any departure from any seat which routinely
the House won't even be in session until, what is it, March 28th, something like that?
Yeah.
Because the leaking roof and the ceiling of the House of Representatives.
Again, that's the reason that's being presented to everyone. I think the Republicans, particularly in the legislature, have cast some doubt on whether that's the real reason. But you know, the bottom line is any departures at all. Almost a year ago, I remember talking about this on this exact show. We're now at the point where just about every decision in the legislature on the House side, the margins are so close that you're going to see stuff like this happen.
You mean 101 to 101?
Yeah. We saw it happen all last year with special elections. We'll have another special election in February to fill this vacant seat. And, you know, if by chance Republicans win that seat, then they'll take control.
Yeah. All right, I got to ask you before I let you go, skill games where you can win money.
Well, certainly the state Supreme Court's going to be hearing an argument that these games of skill, you see them at the gas station, the grocery store, all sorts of places, that they are indeed gambling. That's what's being alleged by the Attorney General's office in this point. But these games of skill have been deemed in lower courts as not being slot machines, as not gambling. And you can win money with these devices.
Yeah.
It's been ruled legal, if you will, by lower courts, but now the state Supreme Court's going to take up the issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you have the state police saying they're illegal, you have the lottery that wants them banned, you have the casino industry that wants them banned, and eventually lawmakers may get around to regulating and taxing them, but in the meantime, they've been a boon for small town bars or corner bars and corner convenience stores. These things are moneymakers for them.
I'm surprised that this hasn't come up sooner.
Well, it's been percolating over the past few
Percolating, but not
years,
in a major way, I think.
This is going to be the decision that really, I think, sort of settles things, or at least gives the legislature a little bit of a push forward to say, okay,
we're going to control it.
Right.
We're going to regulate it. Maybe the better way to put it.
If the Supreme Court says it's legal, or if they say it's illegal, that's going to determine the next course of action here, for sure. And a lot of people, like Marc said, they're using these devices. They're coming in and spending money at a lot of businesses. So you've got a lot of people who don't want to see them go.
All right, thanks for bringing us up to date. I'll tell you, the scams, what we will see in the new year. Joining me to talk about that is Brian Roche, he's consumer investigator for WGAL News 8.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by
Cross-State Credit Union Association. Credit unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, go to ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
Welcome back. Well, as I said earlier, they're after your money, and joining me to talk about the scams for the new year is Brian Roche. He's a leading consumer investigator. He's with WGAL News 8. All right, Brian, let's talk first of all about the check cooking scam. Check cooking. Go ahead.
Well, these are all scams that we anticipate seeing an increase in during the coming year, Terry. And we've talked before about check washing. That's when they steal checks out of mailboxes and they use chemicals to wash the check, like take off your name and take off the dollar amount and then fill in what they want. But now we're evolving to check cooking, which essentially is the same thing. We steal the checks, we erase them, but now with computer technology, the scammers can virtually reprint the check or create an entirely new check that doesn't show any signs of being tampered with. So that's something that we're going to be seeing more of in the coming year. The good news about this is the Postal Service has taken steps to stop the theft of checks out of the mailboxes. They've created new security systems, codes. Right now, anybody can take well, I'm not going to get too far into it, but they can get into the mailbox and steal these envelopes out because, look, you and I send out our payments through the mailbox, and they include checks. But now the Postal Service has taken steps with new security measures and new mailboxes.
Is this growing?
It is at a steady pace right now. Check washing is going to turn into this check cooking scam.
All right, well, let's go to another one, what you've referred to, the voice print scams. Voice print.
Yeah, this is artificial intelligence. I mean, we've been hearing so much about artificial intelligence and experiencing it. I mean, we are now in 2024, and we're going to see a lot of AI and false advertising during the political campaign coming up this year. But with these voice print scams, I just had 2 conversations in the last week with people who told me that they got phone calls and they were convinced it was their loved one on the phone. What the scammers are doing,
really?
Yeah, absolutely convinced. They're taking artificial intelligence and say you post something on your social media page and you're talking, you're speaking, you're giving a speech or something. They capture your voice. And they can feed that into artificial intelligence, these systems, and create a voice as if you're having a conversation with someone else. So we are going to see, we have been seeing, and we're going to continue to see an increase in these kind of scams. The one gentleman I talked to was absolutely convinced that he was talking to his grandson, that his grandson was in trouble with the law, that this voice was so real.
Did he want money?
Of course they wanted money. But while he was on the phone with the grandson, The grandson walked through the door. The grandson came walking through the door while he was on the phone with the supposed grandson. So that's how convincing these things can be. And again, they're stealing voices from social media.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I get these calls from people, a voice, and they start by saying, and I say, I don't know you, thanks, goodbye, hang up the phone. I don't even get anywhere with them.
And it's going to continue to grow. We are going to see, in fact, we're already seeing deep fakes. These are called deep fakes throughout, as I mentioned, the political campaign coming up this year. And a lot of people are going to have to be very skeptical of what they're hearing and seeing, because they can take images as well, not only just the voice, but the images and the voice, and combine it to make it look like this candidate is saying this or this candidate is saying that. But that is something that's going to grow rapidly.
I want to talk about at least two other scams, but in general, given what you've just been describing, the growth of these, the spread of these scams, we're basically saying to people, you've really got to be much more aware than we've been in the past, and that you have to do your own research on some of these scams and how to avoid them.
Yes, and I tell people that quite often. I tell them it's okay to be skeptical. It's okay. The older generation wants to be polite and believe what they're being told, but I try to encourage people all the time, be skeptical. It's okay. Skeptical will save you, and it may save you a lot of money.
All right, we're going to run to a break. Guess what? Celebrity scams. This one will be fascinating.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine.
All right, consumer investigator Brian Roche is chatting about scams that we all need to be aware of and be cautious about. Here's one that's pretty fascinating. Celebrity scams. Am I going to get a call from a celebrity?
You possibly could, yeah. This goes back to what we were just talking about with artificial intelligence. So they can do the same thing, creating voices with celebrities and make it appear that the celebrity is trying to solicit someone. I did talk to a mom last week who was very despondent that her son, about 50 years old, was involved in a scam where he was convinced that he was speaking to Taylor Swift, the pop icon.
Really?
Yes, and Taylor Swift was asking him for money, and he had already sent her $30,000. This is a woman who makes billions of dollars a year. But because the artificial intelligence recreated her voice, and of course there are many examples of her voice out on the internet for scammers to create, or use the artificial intelligence to create, this poor young man, I guess I can call him young because he's younger than me, he was falling for this. And I should point out, Terry, we were talking about the voice print scams before. When they call people, that's what they're trying to do, is make people believe that they need money. In particular, I told you about the grandfather who was on the phone with his grandson, and the grandson walked in. They're trying to make them believe that the grandson is in legal trouble, and they're trying to make them believe that the grandparent or the other family victim needs to pay money. But these voice print AI scams, they are going to continue to proliferate. And I mentioned Taylor Swift. I mean, you can mention just about every celebrity. Their names and likenesses are being used on social media sites. They're being used on Instagram. They're being used to make people believe that this celebrity, who has millions, if not billions of dollars, needs money from you. Be skeptical. Be skeptical.
Oh, believe me, I am, and I hope our viewers are as well. All right, delayed action sweepstakes scam. I had to read that. Delayed action sweepstakes scam.
So I know, I'm very happy to be a guest on your show, and I've been here many times, and you and I have talked about lottery scams. Yeah. And the call very simply is, or the email is, Terry, you've won money. You've won $9 million, but to get that, you need to pay us taxes and fees up front. Go get us a gift card. Well, this new delayed action sweepstakes scam version, they're saying to you, Terry, you've won $10 million, but they don't ask you for money. Instead, they seem very, very legitimate. They pose as federal officers and federal government officials. They say, give me your bank account information.
Oh, my.
And I will put the money in your bank account. I won't even need to send you a check.
I'll tell you, go ahead.
They ask you for a couple of other pieces of official information, including your Social Security.
You know what I'm going to do if I get a call like that? I'm going to say, you don't have to bring the check to me. You tell me where to go to pick up the check.
That's a good
I want
response.
the check. No, nothing, no bank account numbers, none of that.
But what this scam does, it's not asking for money, so people have a sense of comfort with it. They say, oh, well, they don't want any money. This must not be a scam. They're really going to put this into my bank account, which is relatively easy to do. And they get in there, and if they get the bank account information, of course, they're going to clean the account out.
Clean the account
and anything
out.
associated with it.
Yeah. I mean, these seem to be spreading and growing at an alarming rate, all these scams.
The thing I try to emphasize to Terry, and I go out and do a lot of public speaking engagements, is the technology that these scammers have boggles the common mind. Like the things that they have to route their phone calls. They'll send phone calls through 7, 8, 9 different servers, computer servers around the globe. That technology they have to spoof phone calls is something beyond the comprehension of most citizens, and technology is their greatest weapon.
Yeah. All right, let's go to another subject. In order to protect yourself, there's information that we all need to have, and AARP, American Association of Retired People, is that it?
Yeah.
They have information available to us to be sure that we're not scammed.
They have a fraud watch.
A fraud watch.
It's called Fraud Watch, and it's on their website, and I check it quite often. Better Business Bureau also, they'll on a daily basis post the scams that they are getting reports on. Federal Trade Commission as well. They often provide a lot of information about scams, and they usually have amusing videos on there to help drive the point home. But if you have any question about anything you're being told, I always tell people, go ahead and Google it. Like Google whatever they're telling you, then follow it with the word scam. Lottery, sweepstakes, scam. And then you go on there and you'll read the articles, and they'll tell you this is what's happening.
But in general, there seems to be more information about how to deal with scams out for the public.
And that is the greatest weapon that we have. A lot of people contact me after they're scammed, and they want to find the person. And I try to convey to them, it's fruitless to try to find out who this person is and where they are. What we try to do is educate people and tell them what the scam is so they can see it coming down the tracks.
Yeah.
Trying to find these scammers, it's difficult, if not impossible. They're on the other side of the world.
Yeah. And you regularly produce updates on these scams.
Every day. Every day we have our Scam of the Day is on our TV station every single day.
Now, do you know people personally who've been scammed?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I have family members who have fallen victim to some scams, and I chastise them and let them know this is not acceptable in my family.
And I presume now you're getting a lot of phone calls from people about them.
We get a lot of phone calls and emails every single day, people asking, is this a scam? In fact, just before I came out here, I was looking at my email. People had sent me a few emails saying, Mr. Roche, is this a scam? Is this a scam? And we're always happy to answer those questions.
Yeah, I would think so. And hopefully there'll be more involvement from interest groups who want to fight scams.
Education is the best weapon.
Education is, I like that.
Knowledge is power.
All right, you have an assignment. Come back and give us an update. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And as always, stay well.